You can maximize your potential as a medical coder and have a very successful and lucrative career. You might be stuck in your career or wondering where else you can go, or you might be starting out and curious how far this career can take you. Well, let me tell you my story about how I went from having absolutely no medical background to being a very popular medical coding YouTuber and hitting #1 in search. Hey everyone, I'm Victoria. I'm a medical coder, auditor, educator, and content creator, and on my channel I provide tips, tricks, and tutorials to help you be successful in a medical coding career. Now, I don't really like to talk too much about myself on the channel because this really is more an education channel than it is a vlog channel, but I've had a lot of requests for people to understand how they can kind of become me. I've started noticing people that say that they are inspired by me and want to do some similar things that I did, so I thought it would be good to just shoot a video about how I became what I am today. As my channel has grown in popularity and I've seen my name thrown out in different groups and social media platforms, one of the things I've started to notice is people know me as being this super cool YouTuber, and they don't realize all of the things that I had done prior to becoming a YouTuber and why those things factored into my success on YouTube. There's actually a very popular quote from Jeff Bezos that says, "All overnight success takes about 10 years." And in my case, yeah, that was actually true. It took me a little over 10 years to really become the success that I am today. I've talked in the past about how I got to become a medical coder on different podcasts and live streams, so I don't want to go over the whole thing today, but essentially, I originally went to school for web design and got depression and dropped out. You can probably see from some of the things that I put together that I still love that design aspect. I get to still use design when I'm creating my thumbnails, when I'm putting together scripts or social media promotions. I'm still the one behind the scenes that does all of it as a solopreneur. In 2007, I enrolled in Reading Community College for their Medical Billing Specialist Diploma program. It's not an associate's degree program. They actually didn't have one at the time. They do now. But I went there and it was, I think, a 9-month program, and I finished in 2007. And in 2007, I actually started my internship and was hired off of my internship. 2007 was really the start of the end of private practice. At that time, a lot of hospitals were really just starting to form their physician groups, where physicians were starting to become hospital-owned employees as opposed to owning their own practices. Because of that, they had just built at my local hospital this big billing office, were recruiting physicians and buying up practices like crazy. They needed employees to work there, so I was kind of at the right time that they needed employees. I was able to show my skills during my internship, and they hired me right off of my internship. In 2008, that's when they brought in a medical coding instructor and said, "Hey, we need some certified coders. If anyone's interested in becoming a certified coder, we are willing to pay for it. You have to pay for it up front, pass the exam, and then we will reimburse you." So in 2008, I took that dive. In December, I went to Hershey Medical Center to take my CPC exam and passed. At that point, I was still working in charge entry, but I was taking on lots of extra projects in the revenue cycle so that I could learn some new skills and some new tasks. In 2009, an email went out saying that we would like to start a chapter in Reading, Pennsylvania, and we were going to have our first meeting. So I gathered at the first meeting, and only about 5 people showed up, and that's about what we needed for officers. So I became, at the time, it was president-elect of the Reading, Pennsylvania chapter. Not long after, in 2010, I took a second job teaching at a local technical school. I taught medical coding, advanced medical coding, introduction to health information technology, and medical insurance classes. And I left my job at charge entry and went to work at a different hospital in the accounts receivable department. I wasn't in accounts receivable for very long, maybe about 7 months before something opened up in the coding department. And that was when I actually started my first role in medical coding in 2011, after having finished school in 2007. But in 2011, I actually made that first step and became a certified professional medical auditor. So I've been a medical auditor now for a decade. Back then, not a lot of coders had additional credentials. Most just had their CPC, so it got pretty well noticed by the revenue cycle, the organization, and the providers that I worked with. My first coding role was coding for hospitalists, and I coded hospitalists for a while. And then eventually I picked up general surgery, I picked up plastic surgery, I picked up transplant surgery, and then I helped with E&Ms for other departments and some other odds and ends here and there. And then in 2013, I became a certified plastic and reconstructive surgery coder, which is actually a credential that the AAPC no longer offers. So I get to keep my credential, but no one else can actively test for it anymore because there wasn't enough interest in that particular credential and a few other credentials to justify the cost of maintaining the exam, publishing the exam, printing them out, etc. And then in 2014, 7 years after I had been doing this, I had a booming year. I became the education officer of the Allentown, Pennsylvania chapter, and I published 2 articles in Healthcare Business Monthly. The first was on breast reconstruction, and the second one was on cleft lip and palate repairs. Because of those articles I published in Healthcare Business Monthly, I was tapped on the shoulder to do my very first paid webinar. If you think back on the timeline that I was just discussing, in 2012, I really didn't do anything. And the reason for that is because that's the year that I gave birth to my daughter, Lizzie. So now it's 2014, I have a 2-year-old and I have to do a paid webinar at home. I don't have a home office. I actually set up my laptop in my daughter's room while she was in a crib downstairs so that she wouldn't cry while I was doing my webinar. And it was kind of hard to finagle, but I managed to do it. I believe this was also the year that I taught the CPC review class at that chapter. If you've never taught the CPC review, it is like 6 to 8 hours of just going over 300 plus slides to prepare students for the CPC exam. I actually offer the CPC review on demand now on my website. You can purchase it with the link below. This was also the year that I really started to become a presenter because I also presented at the Reading, Pennsylvania chapter on breast reconstruction. And after I had kind of tapped out on everything on my current job, I decided it was time for a change and left that job and took a position as a senior coding specialist. As the senior coding specialist, I was there to kind of answer questions and manage projects more so than people, and also just generally serve as an educational resource for the department and beyond. At that point, I think I had done a couple other presentations. I don't remember the exact specifics, but 2015 was a big year for me because that was the year I spoke at HealthCon in Las Vegas. After doing articles on breast reconstruction and webinars, I felt it was the time to take the next step, and I applied when they had their call for speakers and was accepted. After teaching and publishing articles and doing presentations, it was definitely time to take that next step. And in 2015, I was promoted from senior coding specialist to supervisor of professional coding. It was a pretty intense role. I managed entry-level coders, mid-level coders, and then coding specialists, which were auditors and educators. So organizing how many audits they were doing, how often they were going out and doing education, talking to them when they had complex problems with providers that they needed to work out. A lot of research, a lot of going to meetings with practice managers, with nurse managers, leadership training. It was very intense. Because I was doing so much in that supervisor role, I actually didn't do much extracurricular-wise for a couple of years. In 2017, I decided that management wasn't something I wanted to be in long-term, and I took a position back doing auditing and education. In 2017, I started getting involved again in local chapters and became vice president of the Allentown chapter and spoke at the local chapter seminar. 2018 was when I really started to shine again. I got another credential, certified risk adjustment coder. I published another article in Healthcare Business Monthly on post-bariatric surgery reconstruction for the plastic surgery portions. I became president of the AAPC Allentown chapter and spoke at our Maymania seminar. And I did a big presentation at HealthCon Orlando, Florida. Now I'm picking up speed. In 2019, I became an approved instructor through the AAPC and a fellow of the AAPC. The AAPC fellow designation, you actually have to write a huge paper on and have 10 years of experience. And I really started giving back this year. I went to one of the local community colleges to talk to their medical billing and coding students about the AAPC, getting involved in your chapter, and answer questions that they had about being a medical coder. I had a lot of speaking engagements this year too. I spoke at the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania chapter seminar. I went and spoke at my first AHIMA meeting for the Lehigh Valley Health Information Management Association. I also spoke at several different chapters for the AAPC in person: Lancaster, Altoona, Doylestown, and Allentown. I served again as president of the AAPC Allentown chapter, hosted our first virtual meeting, and then published an article in Healthcare Business Monthly about best practices when hosting a virtual meeting. This was the year that I really started pushing Contempo Coding as a company, and I initially filed it as a sole proprietorship, and then I hosted my first risk adjustment boot camp live. It went fantastic. Now, 2020 was another big year for me, and a big contributing factor to that was because I had been so successful in my career, I had finally gotten to a point where I was able to buy a house. And buying a house and setting up a home office was really what helped me elevate my business. In 2020, I actually took my local chapter involvement to the next level and was accepted into the AAPC local chapter board of directors. So I serve Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, and Washington, D.C. areas. I spoke at the HealthCon Regional Virtual Conference on provider education. I again served as president of the Allentown chapter. I published a bunch of articles for Healthcare Business Monthly, virtual meeting ideas, chapter spotlights, officer spotlights, how to host a roundtable. In 2020, I presented virtually at over a dozen AAPC chapters, and once again, I served as president of the Allentown, Pennsylvania chapter. I got yet another credential, the COC, Certified Outpatient Coder. And this was the year that I finally started my YouTube channel and was featured on the Alpha Coding podcast and the Not Elsewhere Classified podcast. So the channel brings in 13 years worth of experience in coding, in auditing, in education, in management, in getting hired in projects, in dealing with physicians, in dealing with practice managers, in public speaking. Tons of different concepts across all of those years. 2021 is when I took my company, which is now an LLC, full-time and served again as the president of the AAPC Allentown chapter. And learning YouTube and how YouTube works was really a big part of my success. Being successful as a YouTuber took a ton of research. I mean, tons of research, not just learning how YouTube works, learning how search works, learning how the algorithms work, learning how to do thumbnails. I have paid for conferences on how to do YouTube, how to do my camera setup, my lighting, my background, even learning things like take your stuff off of your desk, how to do editing, how to capture your audience's attention. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm noticing that some of the people now that are getting into YouTube have audiences elsewhere. And the thing about that is, though, when you have a big Facebook group, for example, not everyone from your Facebook group is necessarily going to follow you onto YouTube. Actually, let me show you some of my analytics. YouTube gives a lot of great data that I utilize. So on my analytics report, I can hit on my reach, and you can see here as I scroll down that it shows me that my external sources, people that are coming from outside of YouTube, from links outside, are only 9.5% of my audience, so less than 10%. So even though I post and promote my videos on LinkedIn and Instagram, that traffic isn't coming in from them. It's coming from people that are already on the YouTube platform. You can see from the traffic data that most of it is YouTube search, then suggested videos within YouTube, browse features of YouTube, channel pages on YouTube, and then there's that tiny little bit that's external. And I actually have some data down here about the external sources. Some of it is Facebook, and that's not me. I don't promote my YouTube videos on Facebook. That's other people that are sharing them, likely within Facebook groups. But the interesting thing that is on here is I've noticed a lot more schools are sharing my information. So instructors in other programs are probably linking their students to my content, or potentially students are linking other students within their virtual settings to my videos. But I have a bunch here from, you can see Wake Tech is on there, blackboard.com. The new Zenler, I think, is me. I don't even know what DuckDuckGo is. I don't know why that is a messaging thing on here, but you can see msubonline.com. That's probably an education institution. VGC.edu. Anything that's in .edu is a school that's linking to my videos. You can see here mc3.edu. I think I've gotten some, minnesotastate.edu. So there's schools that are actually linking to my content. So not just 13 years of experience dumping into my content, but formatting that content, knowing how to work YouTube and keep people within YouTube so that my videos get promoted. And that's really how the channel got to be so successful in such a short amount of time. So essentially how I became a overnight success was by pouring 13 years worth of experience into my channel. And because I do a lot of investigation and studies and reports and research, I have spreadsheets worth of topics to cover yet. So I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, I would really appreciate it if you hooked me up with a big thumbs up, share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can get alerts when I post new episodes. I will see you in the next episode, and until then, just keep on coding on.